Good morning, and welcome to another Semen Retention Sunday episode here on the Regal Change account. I am Thaddeus, and today we're going to talk about lustful demonic stalkers on semen retention. Now, there are going to be many people that this is not going to really resonate with, simply because they've never experienced this type of a thing before, or they don't really understand what it means to have these types of stalkers coming after you, because these stalkers don't just stalk you in like real life, right? In the earthly domain. They can also stalk you in your dreams. And this is where you have to be very mindful of astral entities or bodiless entities, who not all of these bodiless entities are carrying wisdom, okay? Not all of these beings are carrying your best interests in mind. And what we have to do as practitioners of godlike mastery, and I've worked with over 600 people worldwide when it comes to godlike mastery, one-on-one sessions, and the Regal Academy. And what I can say without any doubt, any shadow of a doubt, is that the people who are consistent in their devotion to the soul of existence are going to be the ones to not only experience this type of stuff, but also be able to just transcend it. Because when you orient yourself from a place of timelessness, these bodiless beings, or these beings with a body who are stalking you, and they have lustful intentions, and they're not very, you can call them demonic, you can call them evil, you can call them whatever you want, but just be aware of the duality there, okay? Just be aware of the duality. Be aware that we are living on multiple planes of consciousness in one moment, because the past only exists because there's a now, and the future only exists because there's a now. So now really is all that there is. I differentiate in the Regal timeline theory, for the Regal Change old timers who are aware of my work in the Regal timeline theory, I differentiate between the present moment and the now, because the present moment is just whatever's happening in watch time, you could say, right? Whereas the now is the totality of everlasting life, you might say. So these are all semantics, right? So just be mindful of that. But now, what do you do about this, and how does this look, when you are on semen retention, and how many days does it take? Well, it really doesn't have there's no set rule for when this happens. It's going to fluctuate depending on the individual, where they're at in their own spiritual path, and how they're wanting to proceed forward. So again, it comes down to your devotion to God, to the soul of existence. And what does that look like? It means, do you really want the truth, or do you want to play the truth? Because you can LARP your way into truth, that's for sure. In fact, I would say that LARPing your way into being certain things is actually a fantastic option for you. It goes in line with Neville Goddard's law of assumption, in which you just assume the outcome by acting as if you're already there, because it is already there. You've just yet to embody it. Your nervous system, or your solar timeline interface is what I call it, has just yet to fully integrate it, because the solar timeline interface is on your side without asking. Okay, that's a blessing in of itself. The body always remembers. So if you've had these weird stalker individuals in the past show up, like for example with me, I didn't get super crazy stalkers up until after about 6 months of me being on semen retention. And I've been on semen retention since May of 2022, and it is now, as of filming this, it is the morning of July 5th, 2026. So I've been on semen retention for quite a while. Now, this doesn't mean that I haven't had wet dreams or anything like that. I do not count wet dreams or nocturnal emissions as any type of relapse because it's unconscious. The body's going to do what it's going to do, and you have to just trust that the body is progressing as it needs to. The body knows way more than you do because there's a wisdom to the body. And it's not that I'm saying that like you don't know anything, but at the same time, like you don't know anything because you have to believe that you exist first. However, when it comes to these stalkers and the lustful demonic stalkers, like for example, there was about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, where a woman who I calmly and compassionately rejected, I told her that I did not think that we're compatible, but I have compassion for her. And she got pretty crazy because I'm pretty sure she told me, well, she didn't tell me this, but I've had other women tell me that I was the first man in her life to ever tell her no. Okay, imagine walking the earth for 2 decades plus, never being told no. And then finally, a 5'6" godlike man who is just calm, cool, and collected tells you, thanks, but no thanks. That would be shocking. You'd shock these people and then their demons would come out. Now, again, when I say they're demons, be mindful of this is loose language, okay? Loose language to describe a phenomenon. It's not necessarily like hyper religious. I'm not religious. I'm ritualistic. So anyway, that was one other woman. But this woman, she started to follow me. And it got so bad to where I had to document certain things going on. And as soon as I started to document what was going on, she kind of backed up a little bit. Now, that was a very interesting phenomenon in of itself because there's no way she should have known that I had a certain schedule at the time. The way that I do things now is I just do things when I do them. Because I'm not looking for superset schedules anymore. My regimen is that of no regimen. My philosophy is that of no philosophy. And if you've watched my channel, the Regal Change channel, that is, because I have another channel, the Regal Shaman channel. The Regal Change channel is comprised basically and mostly of assisting people with information about how to move beyond the celibacy or the semen retention or the lust, etc. Whereas the Regal Shaman channel, that's more of a it's more of a total spiritual overview where we go into deeper topics because a lot of the people that I meet that are men, again, around the world that I've met with people, their primary thing that they want to conquer is lust, because lust is definitely one of the most challenging things for anybody, really. But these, when you become unattainable or unavailable to these lustful demonic stalkers, that's when they want you the most. And so you have to, it's not that you have to change who you are, but you might have to, be a little bit different in your ways of doing things, because women specifically will be very covert about and manipulative about how they go about it. So, for example, with this woman who I said, I have compassion for you, but we're not compatible, right? She started to follow me at the certain times I went to the gym. She started to follow me at the coffee shop that I used to go to. I saw her at the grocery store a few times because I had a set schedule. Again, at the time, I was very disciplined in when I did things and how I did things, because I had to be. Like I was working full time at another job that I had, and I was trying to build my YouTube channel and my business on the other side. So I was very, very rigorous and vigorous in how I went about things. So I would have certain times a day I did things, and she started to catch on to that. And then one day I saw her car parked out my place And I got kind of freaked out because I was like, okay, this is a little too much. Now, keep in mind, this is a reasonably attractive woman. Okay, one of the most attractive women that I've ever talked to. Now, she doesn't need to know that. No, she doesn't need to know that, but she's very attractive. But she had a lot of certain things going on in which I I saw these she was trying to promote jealousy in me, right? She would, because I met her at the gym, and she would say all these innuendos to men around me and then look at me as if, I'm trying to like, ooh, are you listening to this? This is how I talk to men. Ooh, it was just very strange behavior. And after documenting this, when I really started to document things was when I saw her car parked out my apartment, my house. And about a couple weeks later, everything really stopped. But I was ready to go to the police after that, simply because, or somebody, hell, even the mob, right? Not just joking. But it was definitely like shocking that I'd never had a woman that attractive. Like, I didn't know women could do those things to that degree. Like, I knew they were capable, right? But the persistence was just unbelievable. And then when I confronted her about it, I said, hey, look, I'm flattered that you can't stop staring at me and, doing these things, but it's making me uncomfortable. And she said, oh, sometimes I just zone out. Deflection, deception, gaslighting. And I said, I think I made myself pretty clear. And she said, well, there's nothing on my end. And I said, just making sure. And I walked away. And that was when I really had to change my schedule a lot, because it was just too much. And I don't really encourage men to change their schedules to, just fit something else that a woman like that. But here's the thing. In the legal things that are going on in today's world, like, she could very well just project onto me certain things and say certain things about me, and nobody would take it for granted. Like, nobody would think anything of it. Now, I don't really buy into that a whole lot. I'm just saying that is a possibility. I don't feed that narrative structure, because a lot of men want to feed certain narrative structures, especially on semen retention. Like, they give themselves this this ego boost of like, oh yeah, like I don't go approach women because I don't want to go to jail or whatever the case is, right? Like, so I just walk away like a boss. It's like, okay, dude, like, there's nothing wrong with going to talk to a woman. If you're on semen retention and you want to go talk to a woman, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that at all. Oh yeah. When the coffee is cooled down enough to where you can freely drink it. Oh, that's like, there's like that sweet spot, with the coffee. At least for me, that temperature for the coffee. And I don't really put a lot of, because I make a French press, but I don't really put a lot of, coffee grounds in it, but just enough to, spark it up a little bit. Oh, yeah. So anyway, I just had to realize that, like, playing the legal game or playing, like, whatever kind of game that she thinks she's playing is not my game. I have to be the game to play in the spirit of that moment. So I have to completely just move somewhere else, right? Like go somewhere else. Not necessarily like move places, but if she's gonna play that game of deception and like, it's what do they call it? Plausible deniability. Yeah, women are gonna be plausibly denied. Like, they're gonna plausibly deny everything that you've experience, because they want to keep the power, especially if they're under lustful demonic influence, let's say. And again, I use that term loosely, but you understand and understand. So if they're under this influence of, they don't know what they're doing, they have no clue who they are or what they're doing. They're just trying to get power because they're not used to a man with a full sack, and they're not used to a man who is just being who he is. If they're not used to that, then of course, of course that they're going to try to do everything that they can to keep the power. But the thing is that they never had power to begin with. And it goes to show that they don't have power because they have to lie to get their way. Anybody that has to lie, deceive, or step on others to get their way is a weak person. They're weak. That is what they are. They are weak. They're deceptive. They don't have a strong, fortified spirit. If you can live the truth and let die what is false, you're going to be a strong spirit. You're going to be a strong person. Now, personality, I don't like to encourage the use of personality too much, simply because personality doesn't really exist. The soul exists, and it is. It's not even in existence. It is. God is. The soul of existence is. The soul is. Because I see this as we're all one soul expressing itself in different forms. So what do you do in those situations? Well, it depends on like who it is and the situation that you're in. So I switched up my schedule a little bit, and I just became unpredictable. I even became so unpredictable that even myself, I couldn't predict my next move. Like, I was just unpredictable. But simultaneously, you don't have to change being who you are to be who you are all the time, necessarily, especially when it comes to these types of stalkers. You've got to be very careful and mindful of it, but don't get too caught up in the game that they want you to play. And one thing that, in retrospect, I wouldn't have said her staring at me makes me uncomfortable, because at that point, I was still trying to get data, basically, like, who the f am I dealing with here? And I'm glad that I'd said what I did, don't get me wrong, but now knowing who she was, and who she is, I wouldn't have gone back and said that. But it was useful to say that because, number one, I was setting a boundary and I was expressing myself and just being authentic. But number two is I was able to see who she was. And so as much as it was like a risk, in some ways, it was a very good move. But yeah, we have to be mindful of this stuff, right? And that happened to me when I was about 1.5 2 years on semen retention. And at the time, so it was a few years ago. And there was another instance about 6 months where I had like these lustful demonic stalker or sluts, coming about. But other than that, it kind of depends on the day at this point. Like, it really depends. Like, every day is a new day. Every day brings something different and new and spicy and zesty and citrusy. So, with all that being said, I trust that this message reached those that are ready for godlike mastery, or to join the Regal Academy, or just, if you're interested in just listening to this stuff, that's another option. But I really want to focus on the people that are really wanting to transform themselves. So that's who I'm going to focus on and focus with. Peace be with you. Be blessed. Until next time.